Good morning and welcome again. We're so happy you could join us today. I'm Diane Andrews. I'm coordinator here at KACo, and today we're going to be getting the latest updates on the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act as it relates to transportation and hopefully particularly to Kentucky, the impact. Transportation Cabinet Secretary Jim Gray is with us today, along with Commissioner of Rural and Municipal Aid, Bobby Joe Lewis. They don't really need a lot of introduction. I'm sure most of you, if not all, know them. And we so appreciate their time. We know you're busy, and we sincerely appreciate that you have arranged to spend time with us today. To the participants, I noticed there are several that you have your phone number rather than your name. So we need you to change that. So we have your name on the screen so we can give you credit because we report this to DLG. And by the way, those who are eligible will be getting 1 hour of training credit for today's class. We encourage you to ask questions, and you can do that throughout the presentation. You can either type your question in the chat box, you can type, "I have a question," or you can raise your hand. And we will recognize you because we want to be able to get your questions answered as best we can today. If you lose your link, just go back in, use the same login information and log back in. If you have any issues at all during this time, just call someone here at KACo and we can get you back on track. So with that, we're just going to go ahead and get started. So Secretary Gray.
Diane, thank you. And Judge Jim, thank you, sir. Thanks everybody on the call. I was going to say before I get going here that I was really inspired when I heard that there are going to be 85 of y'all on this call. I thought that you all were here just to hear me, and then I found out you were getting credits. They were getting training credit. So, you know, I realized that that really came on because you heard Bobby Joe was going to be on. I always refer to Bobby Joe as our secret weapon. And she's doing, I always love to describe what a great job that she's doing in this role. And I think that those of you on the call who have been engaged with her and involved with her know that she really puts a lot of effort, everything she's got into this job. And, you know, it reminds me because she tells me all the time how much she loves it. And it reminds me of that old adage that that you never work a day when you love what you're doing, you never work a day in your life. And I know that's the way a lot of you all feel out there. I always begin a session like this or a meeting like this by saying, when I'm talking to elected public officials, because I have a little bit of experience there myself, I always start out by saying thank you for your public service. It's really a big deal. And we all know that there are days when it's challenging and you probably want to just throw in the towel, and then you have someone or you have some event that occurs that you realize that it's for a good purpose and that your work is actually meaningful, and there's a few people that actually appreciate it. So with that, I'll get on to the subject at hand, and that's the IIJA, or the latest, I think the latest description of the law is the BIL, Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. And I can tell you all that what I know today is just a little bit more, not a lot more than we knew 5 weeks ago at the annual meeting. Things we thought were on and they were, but you know, it was a legislative process working. And so things were on a good path, but they didn't quite materialize as quickly as everyone thought. As a result, the rulemaking, the regulations and so forth are not in place quite yet. Now, that said, I want to go through some thoughts on this. I do have, since I realized that this was a class, I figured I'd better really prepare. So I've got some prepared remarks, and if y'all just stay with me, and then we'll maybe do some cute questions. If we got some questions, we'll handle those, and then I'm going to ask Bobby Joe to also share her thoughts. So. First off, before I get into my prepared remarks, I will say that I was in Annapolis last week for the National Governors Association meeting, which was focusing on the infrastructure bill, the legislation. There are a number of speakers, including the Federal Highways acting director Stephanie Pollitt, and representatives from U.S. Department of Transportation, the Corps of Engineers, and others at the meeting. There were 5 governors in attendance as well, and a number of my colleagues, my counterparts from other states, transportation secretaries from other states. The one thing that resonated with me was the theme of especially of the grant programs, which I'll talk about here in just a minute. But the themes that we've got to focus on as we prepare grant proposals are transformational projects with a lens on equity and climate. Now that's the way the legislation is written today. That's the way it passed. So this is where we will be working our best to make our proposals follow with that criteria. Okay, so with that in mind, let me go into my remarks that I've worked on here. I've already talked. I start out here by saying that I'm giving praise and a shout out to Bobby Joe. So I've already done that. I'll just put a punctuation point on it. Now, everybody knows, as I said, that the passage of the bill turned out to be a heavy lift for the Congress. But now we do have a new law on the books. As a practical matter, however, we don't know much more about it than we did 5 weeks ago, as I've already mentioned. We've been able to get a broad overview, but as we know as well, it's the details that matter, and the details have yet to be worked out. We do know that the legislation gives us at the Transportation Cabinet reason for optimism, for sure. It's forward-looking bipartisan legislation that provides the tools to make life better in many ways for millions of our fellow Kentuckians. It will improve infrastructure and public works. Now, bear in mind, this is a $550 billion over 5 years of new spending over the formula spending that we have been getting before. Now, that's $550 billion, of course, for the entire country. I'm going to go into how that translates for Kentucky in just a minute. But this legislation improves infrastructure and public works, and it creates good paying jobs, but it's not a cure-all for transportation. First of all, keep in mind that the IIJA isn't just a so-called extra money or just so-called extra money for transportation. It includes a reauthorization of the dedicated federal funds that Kentucky and other states rely on every year to deliver federal transportation projects. Kentucky expects to receive over 5 years, $4.6 billion for our traditional federal program and another $400 million specially designated for bridges. Now, how does that translate annually? That translates annually into roughly somewhere in the neighborhood, still we don't have these numbers precisely, but around $220, $230 million more annually for Kentucky. And how that, I'll put it this way, the way that I always thought of in businesses are run by percentages as much as anything. So this represents for Kentucky in federal funding, in order of magnitude, around 30% more annually over the next 5 years. That is, of course, really very significant. We know that there are pressures on that as well. I'm going to come back to that. So we know that these funds will help us pay for not just the state highway plan projects that are funded with federal dollars, but debt service on bonds, highway safety improvement projects, HSIP projects, and congestion mitigation projects. There's also billions of dollars in new funding for other infrastructure besides transportation. Now, I'm talking about it, billions at the federal level. Within that $550 billion total, there's a lot of funding for such things as water and wastewater, broadband, and electric vehicle infrastructure. The last part is an important point that I want to come back to in a minute because it represents significant funding for Kentucky. The legislation also provides billions of dollars in pools of grant money for significant bridges. These are called bridges of national significance, and we'll come back to that. And projects of substantial economic benefit to communities. States would compete for that funding. This is where those details become critically important. The details that I talked about earlier, the rules of the legislation, in practice, what are the rules that we're going to be following? We don't know exactly how those grant programs are going to work, but we are already in the cabinet. We have already put together some teams to dig into these grant programs, the information that we have today and how they would apply to us. So we want to basically get ahead and get a leg up in this so that when the rules do come out, we're going to have a better understanding of them. Federal Highway Administration will go through a rulemaking process, the rulemaking process that I've already described, and issue guidance to the states. These rules will determine such things as the type of projects that are eligible for funding, how much of a share the states will have to commit. In other words, how much do we have? I want to talk about the Brent Spence Bridge. I'm going to go off into a parenthesis here for a minute. We all know that the Brent Spence Bridge is the poster child for aging infrastructure for the whole country. So it's been in practically every news story about the bill and about the aging infrastructure. Brent Spence Bridge is mentioned. So we know that when we apply for the grant bucket for bridges of national significance, which is a $12.5 billion bucket, we know that we're going to have to come up with some state funds in our proposal. And other states are going to be doing the same thing, which means our matching funds on the state side are going to there's going to be pressure on those matching funds, which brings us back to the age-old question of our funding mechanism. Today, the gasoline tax, motor fuels, the motor vehicle fuels tax, and how that has been really stretched and a lot of pressure on that in the last few years since 2015, as you all know, because you've been big advocates for change here. As you all know, it's been flat since 2015. Whatever the rules turn out to be, I can tell you this. Governor Beshear has made it very clear he is fighting for every available federal dollar. And I can tell you that he's already on that path. He is already out there fighting for those federal dollars. He's been having conversations. In a meeting with him, he said, Jim, I think there's three things that we got to do. Lobby, lobby, lobby. We got to do our best to get ourselves in front of this so we get our fair share. Now, keep in mind, the Congress still has to pass an appropriations bill for all this funding. And that's a very important detail for sure. Still, we are optimistic at the cabinet, and we see it as an opportunity to tackle some of our highest priority projects. I've already mentioned this, but those high priority projects include a second bridge, a companion span, and other improvements to the Brent Spence Bridge corridor through Northern Kentucky and Cincinnati. Those priorities include a new Ohio River Bridge for I-69 at Henderson, where we're already underway and we've taken bids for the approach to that future bridge on I-69. And it includes those high priority projects, include completion of the Mountain Parkway extension and expansion in Eastern Kentucky. We strongly believe we have some very strong candidates for this grant funding. Now, let me shift over to electric vehicles and hybrids and the need for a new revenue model. No surprise to anybody on this call, but I'm just emphasizing it. I'm putting exclamation and punctuation to it. I mentioned earlier that the bill provides a stream of funding for charging stations and other infrastructure related to electric and other alternative fuel vehicles. Now, this is not, as you know, this is part of national and international trends. It adds some urgency to the need for Kentucky to have a new revenue model for transportation funding. The IIJA, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, encourages a move away from fossil fuels and toward electric vehicles, but the major automakers were already moving in that direction. Electric vehicles currently, of course, are a small fraction of the total US car market, but the trend is upward. I can say, again, parenthetically, that in my private sector, my business experience, I did a lot of work with OEMs, with companies like Toyota, and Kia and Volkswagen and Mercedes and BMW and a lot of suppliers. I've never seen a transformation so dramatic as what is going on in the automotive market today with this electric vehicle transition. So every day you see the TV commercials and other advertising for hybrids and electric vehicles with brands that were historically associated with performance and not fuel efficiency. Brands like Cadillac and Mustang and Hummer and Ford trucks. So this is not a trend that is in the future, but it's a trend that's with us today. So what does this mean for a state that depends in large part on a tax on motor fuels to fund its bridge and highway program? And what does this mean for local governments that share in those motor fuels tax revenues? We know what it means, and you know what it means. We know from countless discussions with KACo members that you're very concerned about protecting those shared revenues. We understand that. We know that your county governments and your neighbors in city government count on revenue sharing to help take care of your own streets and roads. Now, here are just a few facts and figures to illustrate the magnitude of our shared responsibilities. I'm sure many of you have heard me use these figures before, but they're not declining, and they serve as a healthy reminder. The Kentucky Transportation Cabinet today maintains nearly 64,000 lane miles of pavement and over 9,000 bridges. That is the 7th largest bridge network and the 8th largest pavement network in the country. And you in county government, along with your counterparts in city government, have responsibility for more than 5,000 local bridges. No small task, no small task. Our Division of Maintenance staff says 534 of our state maintained bridges out of our 9,000 and nearly 9,000 miles of pavement, or 15%, are in poor condition. Now, the price of bringing all those assets up to good or at least fair condition is estimated at $2 billion. Neither the cabinet or our local governments can fulfill our mission and properly serve our constituents unless we keep pavements in good repair and keep bridges safe and functional. So that is all to say that something that you guys already know, we need a new revenue model for transportation in Kentucky. Our cabinet has supported raising the gas tax, but also a move to base funding on vehicle miles traveled. So that, folks, is what I wanted to share with you. And let me turn it over to Commissioner Bobby Joe Lewis now, if that's all right, Diane, or do we want to take some questions now? What's the
Secretary Gray, we do have a question. It's a really good question.
Okay. All right, let's go with it. I hope I can. If I can't answer a question, y'all, I've learned over time that I'm not the smartest kid in the class. Didn't have to be the smartest kid in the class, but I'll try to find the answer.
Okay, so mergers and acquisitions continue to be prevalent in all areas of the economy. Rural counties continue to be constrained by an ever shrinking pool of bidders for asphalt and chip and seal. We have had only one bidder on chip for several years and anticipate with a recent acquisition to only have one bidder going forward on asphalt. How can state transportation possibly aid with this worsening issue? Excuse me.
All right.
With this worsening issue to help with pricing for counties in a one bidder system. everybody loses. What happens when the number is zero?
Right. The, no, there's certainly there's a challenge when there is a single bidder market. Certainly recognize that. I grew up in the construction industry in a very competitive field. And so it's always healthy when we have competition. Now, what's happening today with prices across the board and whatever the commodity is they are rising. And they've risen is in the steel industry where it's very competitive. Prices are up more than 100% in the last 6 months. It's occurring in every commodity. And it's certainly a challenge, and certainly a challenge for all of us who are in this business, and certainly a big challenge for you all in the local markets. If I had an answer and a solution for these rising prices today, I probably wouldn't be in this job. I'd be in a significantly, arguably another role in a higher level, perhaps. So what I suggest is that you do your best to negotiate and to get the best prices, even in a rising market. That's the challenge that we would all have, I would say, today. All right, anybody else? Diane?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, I was taking a call.
All right.
Did that answer your question, Jeff?
It did. I was just wondering if there was any opportunity, to, form some kind of consortium or some kind of co-op in some of these areas where we only have that one bidder system. So just trying to think about what the future looked like. But of course, on pricing, everybody's aware of that. But just seems like our pool is getting so small that we're kind of being really constrained by that budgetary wise. So
Yeah, I think you've got a lot of moving parts to that question, Jeff, or a lot of moving parts to that answer, I would say, including this rise in escalation and inflation that we're experiencing today across the board in commodities. And it's certainly when you've got a limited pool of funds revenue, then it really puts, as you said, it puts a constraint on our ability to execute the work that we need. In fact, that's something that's come up in the conversations at the federal level, at the national level, my counterparts in other states. So my counterpart, the chief executive officer for transportation in Texas, was talking about this just a couple of weeks ago when she was saying, with inflation occurring at the level and price escalations at the level they have been, that we may be challenged to get as much benefit out of this new money that we would hope to get. And everyone around the table was shaking their head, agreeing that that is a real concern, and that represents some real anxiety today. So it translates at every level, Jeff, is what I'm saying. Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Let's go to Bobby Joe now.
Good morning,
Bobby Joe.
everyone. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I'm so happy all of you could join this morning. And as always, I am so happy to give you an update and some pointers on rural and municipal aid. As you know, you're our community partners and we're there to help you. The one thing that I want to emphasize to go off of what Secretary Gray already told you is the IIJA or the BIL, however you want to refer to it, that is not going to increase the money in the revenue sharing model. The revenue sharing model is specifically set up by KRS. So this money is not going to go into the rural and secondary roads, okay? So I've been preaching that to everyone I've talked to. We might get more money in the federal realm, but that's gonna go toward the state highway plan and maybe the Office of Local Programs, which is also in rural and municipal aid, because that program's operated off federal funds and matching from the local entities. But the rural secondary office, where you get funding such as your county road aid, your rural secondary funds, your flex funds, 80/20 bridge, the discretionary program, that's actually separate, but we'll talk about that in a minute too. And then the municipal road aid as well for your counterparts in the city. Those are all based off, as you know, the gas tax. And that is why it is so important for you all to continue your good work and your advocacy for a new revenue model. So I just wanted to put a point of emphasis on that, like the secretary said, that is so important for you as county judges and magistrates and mayors to keep that on your scope. So I wanted to kind of give you an update where we're at in rural municipal aid. In the new fiscal year, I found it very interesting when I got to looking into our emergency funding, because we are approaching the time of the year when your roads just seem to fall apart or fall in the river. You know, I get a lot of calls about that. So for emergency funds since July, we have had right at $6.7 million in emergency funding. We have 8.4 million left, because as you know, when we do the revenue sharing model, 3% is held out when you're a co-op member, right? Everybody knows that. We hold 3%. It's in the emergency pot, and it's basically a first come, first serve type program. So we have 8.5 million right now to assist our community partners through the end of this fiscal year. As far as the 80/20 program, your bridge program where all the counties can get 80,000 toward rehabbing a bridge or, culverts, those kinds of things. We've done 40 projects for a total of about $2 million. We also have, if any of you haven't turned in your flex money request for this year, there are 14 counties that haven't requested flex money for this year. Now you don't lose that money, it rolls over into the next fiscal year. But if you haven't done that, I urge you to contact us so we can get you that flex money. Then rural secondary projects, we have 4 counties that are left to be let. So, and those are in process. So we're doing really well on that. The other thing I wanted to let you know, we have a transportation engineering specialist that has joined our staff. His long-term KYTC employee, his name is Wayne Simpson, a fantastic guy, wonderful engineer, and is doing a great job helping Craig Cottle. I'm sure you all know Craig. And so he's assisting him along with Kelly Johnson, who took Shelby Peel's place. Many of you, I'm sure, had talked to Shelby in the past. Well, Kelly's taken her place. So if you need assistance, just contact Kelly. And then we also have Holly Crosswaite. She used to be a KYTC employee and went to another cabinet, and she liked it so much here, she wanted to come back. And we were happy to have her come back. She's going to be helping us out with TAP applications. For those of you who don't know, the TAP applications are transportation alternative programs. That's sidewalks and trails, those kinds of things. We just had a TAP application cycle. So I kind of wanted to give you an update on that. The cycle closed at the end of September. And we got 62 applications for transportation alternative program projects that totaled over $43 million. The unfortunate thing about that is we only have $10 million. So there's a, overabundance of requests for little money, which as commissioner, that seems to be the story of my life. But we make those dollars stretch, okay? we got a lot of good projects and we're in the process of reviewing them right now to see how we're going to get what I call the most bang for our buck. So that's what we're doing, and hopefully we'll have some information on where that money's going to go here in the next while. When I'm talking about monies that we have provided, I always like to share this with people. With the road aid funding, that is done. It's split into 2 payments. You get that first payment around mid-August, and except for the COVID year, you get the other payment around the end of January, and then what we call make-whole payment at the end of the fiscal year. All right, so we've done the mid-August payment. You can expect another share around the end of January, and then we'll be having our new numbers for the upcoming fiscal year, FY23, around the end of January, and you'll be notified about that from your district engineering office. So far this year, we have sent out $123.8 million in county road aid, and we've sent out $11.7 million in municipal road aid. I also find it interesting. You have to keep in mind, in KYTC, we're a very large cabinet, but the Department for Rural and Municipal Aid, including our field reps, is a very small department. But I like to say, we might be small, but we go out with a bang, because over from 1/1 of 20, 9 of 2021, we have pushed out through the door $378.9 million in this little department. And that's all been to counties. We've done $132 million in rural secondary funds, $42 million in flex funds, and $21 million in 80/20 projects and state emergencies, and then 8.3 in county road aid, 868 in municipal road aid emergencies, and then the discretionary funding. Now, when we talk about discretionary funding, Governor Beshear, I've heard him say this, and I've heard the secretary quote him. He always likes to remind people that the transportation cabinet's mission isn't limited to interstates and highways. It extends to your county roads and city streets that lead to your front door, to your schools, to your workplaces, and to your houses of worship. And that's where the discretionary program comes in. This money is allocated by the legislature in the budget every year. This year, we have $10 million to operate with. There's $16.6 million that's allocated, but we have to take out $5 million for the Kentucky Pride Fund, and then $1.6 million that goes to Short Line Railroad. And so we have $10 million to operate on. So the point I want to make here is, with our discretionary program right now, well, this, I say right now, but this, we get requests every day. And this figure was current as of Wednesday, and today's Friday. Right now, we have $31.2 million in discretionary requests for roads in your communities that are needed. Those are the ones that I have on my pending list that qualify. And when I say qualify, many of you have heard me talk about how, this is a higher standard for discretionary funding, because we want the money to go where it's needed the most and where it can have the most impact in your communities and for your constituents and for all Kentuckians. That's our goal. So we have right now just about $10 million. The legislature did see fit in last fiscal year to give us $10 extra million, which we sent out. So we haven't sent any out since the end of October, except for a couple of emergency things. and the reason why I want you all to understand that the reason why we haven't done that is when we talked about weather a while ago, we're approaching that time of the season where we have snow and ice, and then we have flooding. So, and the blacktop plants are closing. So there's not a lot we can do with it right now anyway. So it's fiscally responsible of us to keep a little money back in case your road falls in the river. Okay. You know, I have to tell you all this little story because the first project, I mean, I hadn't been on the job for like 3 days, and there was a judge out in Eastern Kentucky who called me and said that his road, I mean, literally, he sent me pictures, and literally half of his road had fallen in the river. And that's how they got to their water plant, right? So 2 of their water processing stations had gone down. They only had 1 left, and they couldn't get to it. And you also remember what was going on in March of 2020? COVID had just started, and we were very unsure about it, but we were all told that we needed to wash our hands. And I was like, oh my goodness, they only have 1 water pump station left and they can't get to it. And how's anybody going to have drinking water, number 1? And how is anybody going to be washing their hands? So I went and talked to the secretary, and he's like, yes, absolutely. We need to go ahead and push this through. So we got it done over the weekend. They called a special meeting of their fiscal court, our city council. I don't remember exactly, but anyway, they called their special session of their governing body, and we got it done within like 72 hours, and they had it fixed by the middle of the next week. So that's another thing I'm proud of with rural and municipal aid is we may be small, but we get things done. And I'm sure you all have seen that in the quick turnaround with your MOAs and, you know, so forth, your contracts. If you ever have any problem, all you have to do is call. I think I've given you all my cell phone number numerous times. If anybody doesn't have it, please let me know, and I'll share it with you again. But main point on discretionary, we have right at $10 million, and we have 31.2 million in requests. That's our only regret, or my only regret, and I'm sure the secretary will agree with this, is that we can't fund all these projects for you. If I had the money in the account, and if the secretary had the money, we would be funding your projects that are needed for your communities. I think that's all that I have, unless, oh, I see a question here. Secretary Gray and Commissioner Lewis, you both keep saying a new revenue model. What does that mean? I and others in county government hope that means they're talking with the governor and legislators about supporting a 10-cent or higher increase in the gas tax. Mr. Secretary, do you want to respond to that first, sir?
Oh, I was really hoping you'd give me that chance there, Bobby Joe.
Yes, sir. I knew you would. That's why I said that.
Well, you know, this is where it gets really tough. I would say that we had the best chance that we've had in some time in the last session of the legislature to get this done. And so many county officials and city officials were really working hard on it. I think we've got to keep the pressure. I think that the advocacy and has to continue. But in reality check on the way things are today, you know, we've got unexpected and in decades, unprecedented inflation right now. And that's going to arguably have to settle down before you're going to have a real currency or real traction with an adjustment. That said, I think that we all have to be vigilant and vigorous about this. It's certainly a problem. It's going to impact us in the matching funds that we're going to have available for the grants. I talked about that earlier. So when we say new revenue model, that means not only looking at the motor vehicle fuels tax or the gasoline tax, but it also means looking at electric vehicles and hybrids. right now, we're the only state in our neighboring, among our neighboring states that does not have a fee of some sort associated with electric and hybrids. You know, I routinely, I drive an electric vehicle, and I routinely say I shouldn't be getting away paying nothing to help our highways stay in good shape. And so we need to take action. And my inclination is that it would be an easier lift today when there's so many fewer electric vehicles on the road than it will downstream.